Welcome to the King's Crown podcast, the podcast for our student-led dental magazine here at King's. Today we have Dr. Bergin with us, a tutor here at Guy's who also has his own dental practice. If you have been fortunate enough to talk to him in person in clinics, you will know that he offers very thoughtful, thought-provoking discussions and can often challenge existing thought processes you may have regarding certain topics. This is why we thought he was the perfect person to be interviewing for our issue today regarding ethics. So before we start, for those students who haven't met you yet, it would be great if you could introduce yourself to them.
Hello, I'm Dr. Bergin. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. That's not what everyone wants to hear. So I've been teaching in King's since 2018. I taught in Bath for a number of years before that. So I have a lot of experience teaching undergraduates. I used to have my own private practice. Really, the Royal Bank of London owns my practice. The Royal Bank of Scotland, I should say.
Wow.
So one day I'll pay off the mortgage and then it'll be my practice, me and my partner. We run a fully private practice in, not too far, you can see it beyond those trees over there. You can't see it, but we can see it over there. So it's around about 7-8 miles from here. It's about 30 minutes by tube. Before that, I've got quite wide experience. I qualified in Manchester University. I've worked in council estates. I have worked in mixed NHS private practice, and that's mainly what I was doing until around about 2015, we took over the practice, and since then I've been working only privately, save what we do here at Guy's.
Lovely.
And I enjoy what I do.
That's a great introduction. Thank you. So I guess we can just get started on it right on.
Yeah, so the first question that we want to ask you is, what ethical principle matters the most to you, and what is most important to you?
And what do you mean, relevant to dentistry or relevant to
It could be relevant to dentistry or in general. I remember you spoke a bit about honesty and integrity when I spoke to you last.
Yeah, I think your original question had been something along the lines of like, which GDC principle is your favourite, which is like, well, you know, which punishment did you prefer? So I'd said I think that behaving with honesty and integrity is something which is overarching. It's nothing with dentistry. There is an idea the GDC have about professionalism, which means that you are expected to behave with honesty and integrity, perhaps more so than other people in society. It's probably not the forum to discuss whether or not that is true, but certainly the expectation. I think it's clear that you need to, if you don't behave with honesty and integrity literally means whole, doesn't it? It means being a part of you. To talk about something being integral. So to not behave with integrity means to sort of like be someone other than yourself. So to be honest and to have integrity means to be true to yourself. So that means having a set of guiding principles that you think are important and adhering as far as you can, the best of your ability to those principles, whether you like it or not. And the challenge of life is it's easy to have principles and say, you know, this is how I will behave. Oh, I'll never do this. I'll never do that. I'll only do this. I'll only do that. And the challenge of life is that you get thrown difficult, challenging situations, and you're expected to, well, am I going to behave according to my set principles in those situations, or actually is the moral challenge going to put me under pressure to bend or break those principles? So I think that's what an honesty and integrity is when you come up with those challenges to try and forge that path and continue to behave according to your own set of morals. And dentistry is very much like that. You put under a lot of pressure. Perhaps we'll do a little bit more about the NHS system, but in general, patient comes towards you. The patient has expectations of what they're going to get out of treatment, and you have expectations about, you know, how your day is going to plan, how profitable your practice is going to be. So a dentist is potentially coming at a clinical problem very differently from the way the patient does. So those two might complement each other, or they might not. So when they don't, how does that impact on your moral and your ethical integrity? Is it going to put you under pressure? Well, it will put you under pressure. How are you going to behave in that situation? I think that's what ethics is.
I think that ties in really well.
Yeah.
Go on, bring it on.
The next question. Okay, thinking about autonomy, how often do you find that the patient's needs would clash with what they would desire, and how do you handle those situations? Yeah.
When you say patient's needs clash with what they desire, when you do you mean that a patient comes in and say, I want X?
Yeah.
And actually that's different from what you think they actually require.
As a professional, you could take a look into their teeth and find out what they want isn't exactly what they could get. And that's if that's the scenario.
Right, so a patient comes in with certain expectations and you're examining them and saying, actually, what we can provide for you is not going to meet your expectations. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So are you saying what do you do? Or but I mean that's not necessarily an ethical thing, that's often a communication, isn't it? Patients often will come in and say, I don't know, I want to look like some pop star. They say, that's great, but you're a 73-year-old man and the pop star would look like is an 18-year-old woman. So clearly those expectations can't be met. So it's a question of managing those expectations and communicating them to them in a way that that they understand and don't get too upset, and crucially doing it before they embark on any treatment.
Right.
So in terms of an ethical perspective, I think what I understood at the beginning to be asking was when there is a conflict between what you think the patient actually clinically needs to get them healthy and what they want in order to, I know they have an expectation of something else, of other treatment. Again, that's not necessarily an ethical question. It's a question again of communication and understanding. As it could become an ethical question if the patient desires a certain outcome. Let's say, for argument's sake, the patient says, I want veneers. So let's say you both become very qualified to provide veneers, and you enjoy doing it. That's what you really like doing. But actually, it's not really what the patient needs. You examine the patient, there's periodontal disease all over the place, there's uncontrolled caries, there's all sorts of stuff there. But I don't know, you can maybe charge £10,000 for a nice veneer case, and the patient wants it, the patient says they've got the money. So that could give you an ethical dilemma. Because actually, your motivations for providing the treatment or perhaps in place, but actually it's not what the patient needs. The patient wants it, and you can provide it. They're willing to pay, you're willing to do it, but actually clinically, it's not in their best interests. So there you'd have, it's not really an ethical dilemma. What you should do is clear. You should say, I can't provide this treatment for you, or I can't provide it until we stabilize everything else. And that might not be what the patient wants to hear, and the patient might leave. So you might be in a situation where you pass up on the opportunity to provide treatment that you want to, that's in your economic interest, right? Because it's not in the best interest of the patient. And that, there's a perception that happens quite a lot. And the problem is that there's a perception amongst the public that kind of thing happens quite a lot, that the dentist is providing treatment in their own economic interest rather than the patient's interest. Now, you'd hope that isn't true. You'd certainly hope it's not as true as it's widely perceived. You play a little game. If you go to your phone and you type in the words into Google search bar, dentists are, and see what the drop down menu is.
What did they come up with?
Well, you can try now if you want to see what happens. The words are, is it
greedy,
crooks, scumbags, whatever it is, it's not nice. So I think the profession has a long way to go, and I think those who regulate and are in control of the profession have to ask themselves why it is that in a profession which is so regulated, so over-regulated like dentistry, why is it that people have this perception? It's certainly not working. So the GDC, for example, they act their self-declared role is to act in the interest of the public and to protect the image of the profession from the public. So you get in severe trouble if you, in the eyes of the General Dental Council, appear to be doing something which brings the reputation of the profession into disrepute. So they set themselves as the guardians of that. So you have to ask yourself, given that has been their remit, and so since before I was born, they said that has been their remit, how is it that if you just consult Google, that is what people are thinking of the profession? Something has gone very, very wrong. Whose fault it is not clear. Is it dentist's fault or the whole profession? So everybody that you know in dental school basically somehow metamorphoses post-qualification into some greedy crook. What? Really? Or is it the system that they work into? Or is it simply a mismatch between what society encourages patients to expect from dentistry and what dentists are able to provide? And also complete lack of understanding over the costs involved in providing dentistry. That's not what you asked, but that's what happens if you ask me questions. I go off on a tangent. It's important. Oh, often.
Yeah, it's good.
I think a really
Kids call it waffle. Don't you just waffle.
a good point that you raised just now is about how if you think about the patient's best interest, then obviously doing veneers would not have been the correct answer. But just because a patient desires it, they want it, it could often mask the fact that it's really not the patient's best interest. So the first principle of GDC, that's something we always have to keep in mind before providing treatments and stuff.
Yeah, you have to act in the patient's best interests.
Yeah.
I'll clarify that, because what I don't think, so if a patient requests treatment and you think it's not in their best interests, do you provide that treatment? That's one issue.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue is which is the reverse scenario, which is just as common, where actually there is treatment which is very much in the patient's best interest. So you think it, in fact, anybody reasonable practitioners would think that's what's in their best interest, but they don't want it, for whatever reason. Happens quite a lot. Patient comes in, you've got a tooth which is unrestorable in your eyes, and the patient says, I want to fill it, I want to crown it, I want you to can't do root canal treatment. Well, you can't, because we're not going to go into clinical details, but whatever, let's just say you think it's unrestorable. You think it requires extraction. There's a large apical area, there's large infection. If they don't extract it, we don't need to tell you what might happen. Patient says no. Can you provide that treatment in those circumstances?
I guess you can't really force anything.
Clearly not, right. So we all understand you can't provide that treatment there. It's not in the best interest. You can't provide treatment against the patient's consent, even if you think it's in their interest. And you shouldn't pressure them either to provide treatment that they don't want to have. What happens when the reverse is true? Can the patient pressure you to provide treatment?
Same goes no, can't. So
yeah, so you can't. You're never under. On the one hand, the patient is always able to decline treatment, which is in their best interest, but they don't want it. But what they're not able to do is demand. So they can decline to have the tooth extracted. That's fine, no problem. What they can't then say, well, I've got a hole in the tooth, I need you to fill it for me. Well, I can't do that for you. It's a broken down tooth. It's not in your best interest, I judge, for me to put you through all the treatment which is needed, which might make you off worse than you were in the first place. Assuming that you've judged that's what the case is. So the patient's never in a position, legally and ethically, to demand that you provide treatment that you think is not in their best interest. Their best interest.
Yeah,
not your best interest. So you can't be bothered doing it. Or it's not worth my while, or the fee isn't very high for it, ... Those are not legit reasons for declining treatment. That does have an issue with, for example, with minimally invasive dentistry, where, for example, a patient comes in and you're looking at a small hole, and maybe it's just in the dentin. And you've been taught here in the MI course, I hope you have anyway, you look at the radiograph and think, well, you know what, we could keep an eye on that. And if you deal with all the OH issues, and we look at your diet, and we look at the fluoride, etc., there's a good chance that that cavity, as we see it, might not progress. And we can look at it in 6 months, maybe take a radiograph, etc. Another patient might say, well, that's all very well, but I don't know, I don't trust myself to do that. And there's a hole there, I'm worried that, oh, I don't know, my mum had all these routines, I don't want to have that, just fill it. What about then? Well, can you just say, well, I'm offering it's not your best interest. I'm a minimally invasive. Well, don't do things like that. And what about that situation?
That's a head scratcher. I'll say I'll have to explain everything. Like, I clearly stand with the MI dentistry that I'm taught with, and I personally believe that it's best not to fill it, and there is a good possibility of it just self-healing as long as you have a good diet, good oral hygiene habit. But then if they really insist, I'll tell them about all the advantages and disadvantages, warn them, get proper consent, and then carry on. Because technically, it's not harming the patient. It could be done, I think.
What to do the treatment? No, but yeah, I think that is legitimate. That's a kind of a grey area, because I think a body of opinion could say the patient can demand. They say, look, it's to my clinical benefit, or it would be if I don't want to brush my teeth. I like eating Kit Kats, and I'm not going to cut down from 12 a day. And I don't like the taste of fluoride toothpaste. I'm not a natural healer, I don't like chemicals. So I think that might be legitimate.
Yeah.
But then some practitioners might say, actually, that's against my principles. I'm not going to do it. So I think you could, it's difficult to see what line the GDC might take. There are a number of articles actually discussed this very point, actually, if you look through evidence-based dentistry in the BDJ. But again, that's an area where, so the first two areas that we discussed were kind of like black and white, what you wouldn't do, what you would do. And here's a nice area where actually the patient is demanding treatment that you think is not really in their best interest, but it could be, under certain circumstances. That makes sense?
Yeah. Speaking of minimally invasive dentistry, so dentists have been notorious for being money rakers.
Now you wonder why does that drop down this? You're a dentist student. Yeah, money rakers. Go on.
Due to overtreatment. So why do you think overtreatment was so prevalent?
Where? In the world or in the UK?
In general.
I think it's quite less prevalent in the UK compared to other places. I mean, because I'm from Korea, and when I was first getting interested in dentistry, I started reading books in Korean about dentistry, or like go on YouTube and watch videos related to dentistry, and they were all about how dentists are money rakers and how everybody is overtreating just so that they can make money out of the patients. But what I see from here, at least, or maybe I'm just living in a little bubble in this dental hospital, but I don't see it as much. So,
well, you won't get it at all in the dental school. There's no reason why you're in dentistry. Look, there's two separate things. Number one is we talked about ethics and morals at the beginning. So, any scenario where you find a conflict between what's in your economic interest and what is the right thing to do. So that's a human choice. And unfortunately, you see throughout the world, lots of human beings won't face with such a choice, rationalize themselves and then say, well, I'm going to take the other option. In dentistry, and particularly, I think a lot of it depends on the way they're going to be paid. So the problem is that dentistry is a need, it's not a want, generally speaking, excluding cosmetics. So patients don't think, oh, I really want a root canal treatment. Or I really think I need 4 composites and maybe some perio, that'd be really great. Some non-surgical perio, some deep scaling. Do you know I can get that done? Whereas people do think, well, I want handbags, I want holidays, I want cars, I want good food, So people are prepared to pay money for things that they want. They're not necessarily prepared to pay money for things that they need. So you haven't therefore got dental surgery. So you get BDS, you get some experience, you open up, Dr. Nicole's dental practice. Here's roll up. And they don't come flocking. So what do? That is then compounded by the fact that in most countries there is a third-party payment system that decides how you're going to get paid. Here it has been certainly so it's happening to the health service, but let's say the NHS, and in other countries it's insurance companies, particularly in the States. So those are the models. Now the insurance companies and the NHS, they all want value for money. So their motivation is to get maximum amount of dentistry for least amount of money. If I'm an insurance company and your patient comes to see you, well, I don't want to pay out your patient for them to treat with you. So I'm going to kind of like decide when they are and then they aren't entitled to treatment and when they aren't going to get paid. So take my dentistry, take the conversations we've been having. Actually, a lot of good dentistry, good practice is sitting with the patient and discussing prevention with them, oral hygiene. It's the relationship with the patient. You just come and see me frequently. We're not going to do that much. We're not going to do that many interventions. We see the hygienist frequently. We're going to do all of these things, and that's what's important. So actually, really and truly, that's what we should be charging patients for. But people don't want to, and governments don't want to, and insurance companies don't want to pay you for what's in your head, which is the most important thing. They're really prepared to pay you for a product. So not for a service. Right, how many fillings are you going to do? We'll pay you per filling. We're going to pay you per crown, per endo. We're not going to pay you per 10 minutes you spend with the patient. So what happens is we're dentists economically are motivated to keep the consultation part of the process as short as possible because there's a limit to how much you can charge for that. Even in fully private practice, in our practice, we don't have any kind of payment system per se. You may have heard of Denplan or various other practice plans where the patient pays in a premium per month and then you receive treatment. It's like a kind of insurance. So patients come in, they pay per fee per item. So we can set off fees however we want. But even then, we still set more or less as a loss leader the fees for consultations and examinations. Why? Because that's what the market dictates. Patients are not, they're prepared to pay a higher rate per hour for treatment because they feel I've got something tangible. I've got a filling, I eat in it every single day. I've got a crown, I've got an endo, I've got whatever it is, I've got that. But when you say, well, I'm going to pay for the consultation, we're talking about consultations, they're free, is it? Everywhere you go, it's everywhere you're going to get is that, well, I sort of free consult, But that's how lots of trade works. They expect the expertise in terms of your knowledge to be free, but that is what costs us the most to deliver. And that is who we are. What makes you a really good dentist compared to someone who's not is the amount of knowledge you've acquired over a period of time. And it's your time with the patient. That's what costs the most. So very few systems, in fact, probably no system that I'm aware of, rewards you for that. So dentists then effectively are obliged to use treatments. You're working in a system which obliges you to use treatments as a way to subsidize everything else that you're doing. Well, how does that work when actually sometimes you're required to act in the patient's best interest, which means no treatment? So how do you provide an MI practice and make money from it? The answer is over a long time with reputation, because you can invest in it where, so patients come to see us in our practice because they know that we value minimally interventive dentistry, and they can also understand that the previous practice owner would say to them, look, you might go to one practice, they charge £100 for filling, and we charge £300. That's 3 times the amount. But you know what? Our treatment plans will be cheaper. Why? Because you go to dentist X and they see you 10 fillings, £100 equals £1,000. But whereas we say, actually, we really probably only do 1 or 2 of those fillings. The rest of them we can monitor with everything else. And actually, your treatment plan is only going to cost £600. Now, you're paying more for the fillings, but actually, you're having a cheaper plan and you're getting much higher quality care because you're not having unnecessarily drilled teeth. You're getting excellent care. We're looking after you, but it takes a long time to build up that kind of reputation. Where you're sitting there scratching your head, waiting for patients to come in. So a lot of dentists are kind of saying, well, I need to make the money back. So I need to make back my investment in. I worked hard for 10 A stars on my users, using got 3 A stars on my A levels and the hardest exams possible, and everybody else was basically doing nothing. And then that was before I even got into dentist school, and we had exam after exam after exam after exam, working full time for 5 years, plus DFT. And finally, I get out there after God knows how many years working. And now, I want to start buying some handbags. I want to start paying for things, paying off a student debt. What am I going to do that? And the health service says, right, you're going to get 1 UDA for an examination. And you're an associate, get paid around about £10, £11 per UDA. That's £10, £11 for a consultation, plus any x-rays, plus informed consent, plus any perio that needs to be done. That's all done for free. Plus the fish ceiling, we're going to throw that in. That's all for £10. That might be 2-3 visits. 40 minutes a visit, maybe. Are you out of your mind? So first of all, that's when nobody wants to work on the NHS anymore. But of course, so someone stuck in that system is trying to say, the only way I can do that is by selling private treatment, which is not available on the NHS, and go down that route. If you don't push it, you can't sell it. So I think that's why dentists have had that reputation. And people probably say the same thing about other people, think about car mechanics and the like, etc. So people don't trust lots of trades. People trust builders. Do people just? Unfortunately, people are starting not to trust doctors as well. But it is a big problem when people don't trust healthcare professionals. It's a much bigger problem when people don't trust builders, they don't trust plumbers. So you've got to be careful not to do that and just do the best you can. And your own career, you have to work out how much of it is going to be about saving the profession and how much of it is just going to be about me doing the best that I can. Because looking at it from a purely selfish perspective, the more that is out there, the more you can strive to build a reputation for honesty and integrity and providing dentistry that way, the more patients will come to you.
But even for building reputation, for patients to come to you, don't the patients first have to understand that MI dentistry is effective? Because just looking at how systems work right now, they only pay you with the treatments that you carry out because they only see value in that rather than the preventative consultations that you carry out. That's probably the same for the patients, for the society, and for the public. They don't see value in consultation. So no matter how much reputation you build, I think the reputation will come with the skills that's how well you do the fillings, how well you do endo, rather than, this dentist is great for providing such great preventative care. So
That's
I think
true,
that's
but
another problem that we have to tackle.
That's true, absolutely. You've got to be able to do it well because, well, it's clear. And patients will know, listen, if you provide a filling and it doesn't last until the patient gets home, they're not going to come back and see you other than to complain. So clearly your dentistry has to be of a certain standard in order for you to build any kind of reputation. But I think in our practice, I can tell you there are patients that come to us and they do value minimally invasive dentistry.
Oh, great. Okay.
For sure they do. Especially patients that have had, you get patients that quite often will come to see us with a big treatment plan, saying, "Oh, my son, daughter." What happens quite a lot, for example, is you see a patient and their children. So children often don't stay in the area when they grow up, but you've maybe seen them for a period of time. So you looked after them when they were 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and then they got to university, and then something happens, and they walk into a lamppost and go to the dentist and say, "Oh, by the way, you need da 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 da."
Oh.
And quite often we get emails from parents saying, my daughter saw you 3-4 years ago, and now she lives with us. He says you need 15 fillings. It can only be one of two things. It can either be angry, how come you didn't diagnose it? Or it can be, can you just check? Because I know that we're nervous about this, and they send the x-rays, and you look at that and think, well, obviously you can't make decisions based purely on x-rays. But you look at that and say, well, actually, I'm comparing this to the x-rays that we took 5 years ago, and of these 12 fillings on the treatment plan, I would do maybe 1.5 of them. And that happens quite a lot, I would say, in our practice. Quite a lot. So it's worthwhile persevering. And it's getting more traction. There's a department in this practice. For 4 years, I was teaching Cons and MI, Cons and minimally invasive dentistry. So the fact that the department here is called Cons and MI is a big thing. I taught in Barts, wasn't a Cons and MI department.
What's it called?
It was just called filling. No. It was restorative dentistry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I can tell you that, I haven't been there since 2018, but when I was teaching there, I do think there's definitely more of a, isn't a question, there is much more of an emphasis on MI here than there was in Barts when I was teaching, certainly much more of an emphasis on MI than where I was an undergraduate in Manchester. Although they were talking about it, there wasn't the department of it, and the Picard's manual, which you all have. It used to be called, it used to be called, so it's now in the 11th edition, I think until about the 7th or 8th edition of it, it used to be called Picard's Manual of Operative Dentistry. Now it's called Picard's Manual of Minimally Invasive Dentistry. So, and Prof. Banerjee has pushed that forward. So that is gradually gaining traction. And now you're seeing mainstream articles throughout the, in journals like the BDJ, Evidence-Based Dentistry, which are clearly extolling that minimally invasive dentistry is here to stay. It's not just in this country. It's not very widely accepted so much in the US. And in dentists and in countries where the healthcare systems are based upon US practice. But it's gaining traction, so much so that I think if you didn't practice MI dentistry and something went wrong, the GDC would probably expect you, would hold you to those standards. That why did you not practice minimally invasively? Why did you feel this? Did you discuss with the patient? Where's the evidence that you had informed consent about that? So I think that will change for sure. Whether or not patients are prepared to pay for it remains to be seen. But I think over time, if patients are able to discern that there's a different way of doing things and there's a tangible benefit to them of being treated under one philosophy rather than another, then let's say God forbid you needed you had a problem with one of your kidneys or something like that. You go to see you would see one urologist and no problem, just you got two. We'll take out one kidney, no problem. And it's someone else, we could probably use these drugs, etc., and we can do a course of non-invasive surgery. Would you prefer now just take it out? Clearly not. I think when it comes to surgery, if you have a medical problem, everyone's like, well, what are they? I don't want to go to chopper out. I'd rather go for a kind of like watch and waiter. So part of it is that people don't value their mouth and their teeth in the same way they value other parts of their body. That's for sure true. Definitely. But that is changing. That is changing. And once that becomes more of an issue, you'd expect patients to tune in to minimally invasive dentistry, and maybe, just maybe once when that happens, people will be prepared to pay more for consultation. The same. My brother's an optometrist, by the way. It's the same thing. Do you pay for your eye tests? How much do you pay for your eye tests?
£20.
Yeah, 20 quid. What is that about? So all of the training is in the eye test. All of the training for an optometrist in the years, not quite as much as dentistry, but 3 years plus another year postgrad. What? And then they look at you and then do all this little things. It's better with or without about things. And then you come in and they say, "Oh, that'll be 15 quid." Okay, fine. But a pair of glasses, that's like 400 quid, or the lenses each. But they're making money from the glasses, which anyone can. You don't have to be a qualified optometrist to make glasses. You get them quicker from Specsavers, get a prescription. So, and it's a big issue with an optometry, but why should you not pay? Now, the best optometrists, a few of them, do charge you a lot of money for their eye test. Why? Because that's actually what's really important. But because they've been a consumerist society, people think, well, it's the glasses. Well, what I'm wanting glasses, is it? So I want 50 quid for my eye test to get a prescription, please, and I can go to get my glasses online. So again, perceptions have to change.
You mentioned before about a lot of people like not caring about their mouths, but do you think also then
I didn't say they don't care about their mouths. No, what I said was it's important that it's important that people don't value their oral health in the same way that they value other parts of their body. They do care about their mouths, want to look nice, they don't want to be in pain, but they don't see it as an integral part of their health in the way that they say, that they do other parts of their body. That, I think, is slow to change. So that hopefully will change. And the profession has a lot to do.
Do you think dentists have failed in educating about the importance of oral health? Because, for example, I remember like first and second year, when you talk to dental students, a lot of us weren't told by a dentist like certain things. And we didn't learn like spit, don't rinse, or like stuff like that. We didn't know about it until we started dental school. So, which is quite crazy since we've.
Yeah, but then I give that pieces everything else I've been saying about dentists not being paid yet. You're not being paid to sit down with patients and sit there, right, Nicole, here we go, let's spend half an hour, do this, do that. You're doing that for free, and you've got huge practice expenses. So I would say, you can lay the blame at dentists, but so much of the blame, unfortunately, you have to put at the door of the NHS and by extension, General Society and the GDC and everything like that, because people, the NHS, generally speaking, people think is collapsing. But for certainly up until now, from its inception in 1948 until very recently, the NHS is the access to healthcare and education and boundary bodies for everybody in the country. So what the NHS has to say is what people would accept as being true or not. And when it came to dentistry, the NHS has been, since way before I was born, been very, very poor relation. There's never been anywhere near enough funding. It's been, the level of underfunding in the NHS is wide for everyone to see. The level of general underfunding in the NHS, the NHS is like the best funded thing in the entire world, generally speaking, compared to dentistry. It's minuscule. It's a lot. And even if you were to quadruple the NHS budget overnight, you would not solve its problems in dentistry. You would very much solve its problems in the general NHS. The country would go bankrupt, but let's just say. For example, let's just say you could quadruple the NHS budget overnight without really massively changing much of what's going on. It probably wouldn't change things.
What do you think would change?
It's going to take a lot longer to get. It's going back, but they're basically proper funding over time, and there's never been even any dialogue with dentists on the NHS. I think that successive governments, going back forever, really never really understood what dentistry was about. The NHS, when it was founded, dentistry was all about people who couldn't access any dentist. A mouthful of decaying disease and sepsis, people needed teeth extracting and filling and dentures being made. And the whole NHS system was based upon doing that, and also based upon people dying before they were 70. That's just what people did in 1948, generally speaking. And it never moved on from there. There was that kind of structure and how much you had to budget for NHS. Dentistry kind of was okay at the beginning, and as that kind of began to change, it was just that one constriction after another. We're not prepared to really engage with the profession. Dentistry massively changed, so the idea of engaging with perception, no governments were interested in it. The current system, I should say, which is still there, was introduced in 2006. after a lot of dilling and dallying by the previous Labour government, at a time when there was loads of money. I remember Chief Dental Officer standing in front of us going, "This will not fail due to lack of funding." And everyone's thinking, "Oh, but that isn't going to be true." But there was lots of money at the time. So like when I qualified, it sounds like Mickey Mouse now, but when I qualified, the country was never doing better. In the 2000s, until the 2008 crisis, there was funding and everything seemed to be getting better. Well, things weren't necessarily getting better, but there seemed to be more funding for everything and everything. But NHS dentistry was still sliding downhill, and this new contract, which was introduced in the middle of an economic boom, made things worse. Right. And every single dentist saying, don't do this. But everyone in the profession was saying, don't do this. And the government at the time just did it and introduced this contract with predictable disaster. It's actually been one of the few things where at the time it was introduced, everybody said, this will be a disaster. And it has actually turned out to be the disaster, in fact, even worse than everybody predicted. And it's gone on. When was 2006? That was 14, 15, 17 years ago.
Is that the one that they introduced UDAs?
Yeah, so that UDAs was so you can massively blame the Labour government for introducing it, but it's been 13 years with a subsequent government, with several subsequent governments, lots of changes to the Prime Minister, and everyone's looking at, what are we going to do with this? Oh gosh, what are we going to do with that? But no government wants to change it, because no government wants to. What would happen if the government would say, okay, we're going to pay dentists for their time. You spend as much time with the patients. Okay, and you're going to pay you a nice salary, and you take as long as you want. What would happen?
Going along with the theory that dentists are money makers, they would try to spend as much time, drag along the consultation.
But even if you did it, let's just say that dentists behave perfectly ethically. Mm-hmm. What is the big problem for governments? If you're in terms of healthcare, what's the worst thing that you want? Is it waiting lists and access? That's like the big. We go reduce waiting lists and increase access. Anyone that wants can get. If you turn around to dentists, the big problem is dentists are seeing far too many patients, especially on the NHS. Yeah. So if you had introduced a system which said, right, dentists are going to be paid for their time, dentists would say, right, okay, well, we're going to start. Okay, how long do you need? Well, what's wrong with that? I have an hour for every new patient in practice, and I have minimum of half an hour for examination. So if every NHS dentist did that, waiting lists would go up.
If dentists were paid fairly, then so many dentists that leave the NHS might join.
Yes, but where's the money going to come from? If you divided the existing amount of money and said, right, what we're going to do now is to attract dentists back in. What we're going to do is start paying dentists for their time without putting, I'd say, you have to quadruple the budget. You have to do that. We're going to do that, pay everyone nicely, and we're going to quadruple the budget, or more than quadruple, but times it by 10. So that we're going to introduce, because where's it going to go? Because the wait, if they did that, even if dentists say, oh, that's not bad, I'll work in that system, but everyone's seeing far less patients, unless there's only a certain amount of money for it to go around. Now, I'm not going to get involved with a discussion about where there's enough money to go around, where that money should come from. But, you can't expect to pay peanuts and not get monkeys. So, government has a big role to play. So, and you expect the public to be educated. Well, no government that I can recall, and no government that anybody who's a lot older than me can recall, has ever sat down and said, what needs to happen to make this world-class dentistry? It's only recently become headline news. Normally speaking, if people are waiting 18 months for hip replacement, that's a vote winner and a vote loser. And it comes to an election. People can't get a dentist or not. It's probably, there are only 30,000 dentists in the country. And most people are quite happy not to go to the dentist if they can avoid it. So people don't decide, I'm going to go Labour, Conservative, or Liberal Democrat, or SNP in Scotland on the basis of who their dentist is. But they might well vote that on the basis of my mum can't get, the treatment that she needs. They think whatever their great uncle's care home is a disaster. All of those things are vote winners. We live in a democracy, so democratic politicians have to chase the votes. And dentistry is not a big vote winner. So, it's very difficult to see how in the future there's ever going to be, whatever utopia which might happen, the NHS dentistry is going to be the big winner. But I think you have to lay the blame, a large part of it, at the foot of successive governments. Well, there's also public health messages. Like during COVID, when they wanted people to know about vaccines, everybody flipping knew about it. When they wanted people to know about stay at home, if governments want people to know about things, they have ways of communicating that. I don't really want government messages. The government messages about right, okay, we're going to do something about the state of the all health of the nation. Even if they didn't spend the money on dentistry and say, right, okay, we've got a big problem with dentists. This is what you need to do. You need to brush your teeth. Yeah. By the way, the fuzzy end of the toothbrush is the bit which goes in your mouth. But you don't really see that. There've been also public health campaigns. I don't remember an oral health campaign, not in my lifetime, anyway. So I don't think it's fair to blame dentists for that. You've got a finite amount of time, and you're not being paid for it.
Yeah. So would you say it's a naive way of thinking?
That's it. So not going to dentistry for the money. No, I think it is crucial not to go into dentistry for the money. I mean, look, I don't think it's a particularly good choosing. I don't think it's a bad thing to choose your profession. What would you like to do for a career? Well, do something which is going to earn money. Like, why do we work? I mean, you might love what you're doing. The reason why you do what you're doing is in order to get paid for it. So to pick to do something which pays well, I think that's not naive. That's realistic. People want to do something that is going to be financially rewarding, but that is a very bad reason to choose dentistry. Now, I'm going to qualify that in saying that if dentistry is not financially rewarding, then why on earth would you do it? And I think that people, same thing with the junior doctors striking, etc. But future governments, if they want dentistry to remain, and society as a whole, the GDC also have to consider. Think how many hoops you have to jump through in order to become a dentist. We already talked about how hard you have to work in school before and afterwards, during dental school. It's a lot of stress, and then the GDC want to then treat you like a naughty little boy for the rest of your career. So it's like, if that is the case, people are not going to want to do that just for the love of it. You're going to want to be adequately financially rewarded, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's crucial. If you don't adequately financially reward people in sectors which are important, people will not do it. People want to be able to feed their family, they live in affordable housing, and have a nice life and not work themselves to death before they're 60. So I think that's absolutely right. Having said that, if you are primarily motivated by making money, I'm not going to make a judgment on that, but if you are, then I think dentistry is a phenomenally stupid profession to go into. There are so many easier ways to make a lot of money in 2023 than your dentistry. I think in my grandparents' generation, the idea that if you worked hard in school, went to university and got a profession, law, medicine, dentistry, accounting, pharmacy, then you're pretty much assured financial security for the rest of your life. That has stopped now. So that is not true. Now, whether it's not true to say that professions are more rewarded than other parts of society, I don't even know if that is true. Certainly not at the bottom. Professions are more like a pyramid now, where you've got fewer people earning a lot at the top, and then you've got more and more people at the bottom working very hard, earning not that much compared to where they were. But you'd be very stupid to go to dentistry for money. But it can be a very financially rewarding career, there's no doubt about it. But there are so many challenges in providing high quality dentistry, or providing any dentistry, to patients over a period of time, whether it's in practice, particularly in practice, but also in hospital. It's before you even start the training that you have to go through throughout your career, by the way. It doesn't stop when you get your BDS. If you didn't enjoy that and feel as though that you were doing something rewarding in and of itself, and you talked about integrity, again, that being part of you is being rewarded for doing what you're doing, irrespective of how much you're being paid, then I think you would hate it.
What do you find rewarding?
What, in dentistry?
Yeah.
There are lots of things. I find my practice is one of the great things about owning your own practice and working over a period of time is that the patients that gravitate towards you are the patients that want the dentistry that you can offer. They like your personality, the way you talk to them, the way you provide the dentistry, and they're happy to pay the fees that you need to charge to make your practice go. So patients that can't or won't pay my fees don't come and see me. Patients that want dentistry that I can't provide don't come and see me. So that is more difficult and challenging at the beginning of your career, because you do end up trying to shoehorn stuff which patients want, but you haven't really got much option other than to provide them. So I really enjoy that. That makes practice much more rewarding. It's about human relationships. So relationships with your patients, with your with your staff, with your nurses, with your colleagues. I mean, life is about relationships, basically, all of it. And the relationships, whether it's your closest relationships to your spouses and your siblings and your parents and your close family, then all the way to the other end is the guy that nods at you on the tube, in the morning on a Tuesday. That's also some sort of a relationship. And there's everything else in between, friends, whatever it is, teachers. Some of those relationships drift in and out of your life, but that's what gives life its richness. And dentistry, if you like that and you enjoy that and you kind of become like almost a connoisseur of relationships, then dentistry is great because it's a people profession. You spend your life with patients. So if you can get to the situation where the patients are as I described, so that's much more rewarding. So that's fabulously rewarding. And to have that and to build I've been fortunate enough to build a practice where I've got a great team with me. So the receptionists, the practice manager, the hygienists, the nurses, the professional colleagues that I have, that together with the patients. Then they're teaching as well. It's the same thing, your professional colleagues that you work with and teach with, and the students themselves. So all of that comes together to provide this kind of like rich tapestry of relationships, all connected somehow to dentistry, over and above the other personal relationships that you have. And I find that enriching.
I think I can really see that because I think I'm a very easily stressed person. And I think sometimes the weight of dentistry is very crushing. And sometimes I'm not sure if I can do it. Sometimes when I'm on ICC, so for those of you who don't know what ICC is, it's where we carry out treatment. And I'll have certain patients who are so encouraging and so kind, and it's like I want to do, obviously want to do the best for every patient, but some of them, it makes it feel worthwhile, if that makes sense. So I definitely understand what you mean. I think we've gone through everything. So thank you for tuning in to today's episode of The King's Crown, where we've discussed ethics and other topics with Dr. Bergin. We greatly appreciate you for joining us today and being so open with such a controversial and sensitive topic in dentistry. And thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. This was The King's Crown podcast.